Max Verstappen just delivered a perfect race at the Nürburgring, nearly a full minute ahead. No mistakes, total domination on the most brutal track in motorsport. And then, hours later, he lost everything. Not because of a crash, not because of a rival, because of something no one saw. For extra tires. That's it. 24 allowed, 28 used, and those 4 tires completely erased one of the most dominant victories ever. But here's where it gets even more shocking. This wasn't caught during the race. No one noticed. No one questioned it. Until the data exposed the truth. Barcode tracking. Post-race inspection. Cold, undeniable numbers. And the moment officials saw it, there was no discussion. No second chance. Victory deleted. Results rewritten. History changed. And what this reveals about how races are really decided today will completely change how you watch Formula One forever. Subscribe now, because the truth behind this is far bigger than just 4 tires. At first, nothing about that race felt suspicious. That's what makes this so dangerous. Because if you were watching live, you saw perfection. Verstappen wasn't fighting for the lead. He wasn't under pressure. He was managing everything. And that kind of dominance is the hardest to question. Lap after lap, the gap kept growing. Not aggressively, not dramatically, but consistently. The kind of pace that doesn't create attention. It removes it, because when a driver looks that comfortable, people stop asking questions. They assume everything is under control. And that's exactly what happened. No one questioned the strategy. No one questioned the consistency. No one asked why the car never seemed to struggle. But here's where things start to feel different. Because the Nürburgring doesn't allow clean races. It's too long, too unpredictable, too brutal on tires. Everyone struggles there. Grip fades. Performance drops. Drivers adapt. That's normal. That's expected. But Verstappen's race didn't follow that pattern. The performance stayed stable. Almost flat. No visible drop-off. No moment where the car looked vulnerable. And at the time, that looked like greatness. Now it looks like something else. Because tires are the one limitation no team can escape. They define everything. Your pace, your strategy, your survival. And every team is forced to respect that limit. Carefully, constantly. So when one car appears to operate without that pressure, it changes the entire picture. Because having access to more tires isn't just about grip. It's about freedom. Freedom to push harder. Freedom to recover faster. Freedom to avoid the compromises everyone else has to make. And over 4 hours, that's not a small advantage. That's control. But here's the detail that no one noticed at the time. This advantage was invisible. There was no obvious moment. No sudden gain. No clear turning point. It was hidden. Inside consistency. Inside stability. Inside a performance that looked too perfect. And in motorsport, too perfect is where the real questions begin. Because while other teams were managing decline, stretching their tires, fighting the natural limits of the track, one car didn't have to. It was operating in a different window. A safer one. A faster one. A more controlled one. And no one realized. Because nothing looked wrong. Until the data told a different story. And by the time that happened, the race was already over. The result was already accepted. The victory was already celebrated. But the truth was still hidden, waiting to be discovered. And the moment officials started looking deeper, everything began to unravel. And this is where everything starts to fall apart. Not on track, not in front of fans, but in a quiet room where races are truly decided. Because once the cars returned to the paddock, the real process began. Post-race inspection. Now this is the part most people never see. There are no cameras, no noise, no pressure, just officials, engineers, and data. Cold data. Every component is checked. Every number is verified. Every detail is compared against the regulations. And in this case, they weren't looking for something dramatic. They were looking for consistency, for alignment between what was used and what was allowed. And that's when they saw it. A number that didn't match. At first, it looked small, almost irrelevant, just a difference on a screen. But in motorsport, small differences don't stay small, because tires are not just counted. They are tracked individually. Each one has an identity, a code, a record, a history tied to that specific car. So when officials reviewed the logs, there was no confusion, no estimation, just a clear, undeniable count. 24 allowed, 28 used, and in that moment, the race was already lost, even if no one had announced it yet. Because here's the reality. You cannot undo this. You cannot remove the advantage. You cannot pretend those extra tires didn't affect the race. They already had. Across every stint. Across every decision. Across the entire 4 hours. So the officials didn't need to debate. They didn't need interpretation. They only needed confirmation. And once that confirmation came, there was only one outcome. Disqualification. Not a penalty. Not a warning. Complete removal. Because this kind of violation breaks the foundation of the result itself. And here's the part that makes it even more intense. While fans were still celebrating, while highlights were spreading, while the story of dominance was being told, inside that room, the real story had already been written, a document prepared, a decision finalized. And when it was finally released, it didn't feel dramatic. It felt instant, because in one moment, Verstappen was the winner. And in the next, he wasn't even in the results. Gone. Erased completely. And just like that, another team inherited victory. Without a fight. Without a final lap. Just a correction. Now here's the detail that changes everything. There was no resistance. No appeal. No argument from the team. They accepted it. Immediately. And that tells you something crucial. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a gray area. This was undeniable. Which leads to the question that really matters. How does something this controlled go wrong? Because tire usage is one of the most monitored elements in endurance racing. It's planned before the race, tracked during every stint, verified after every stop. There are systems built specifically to prevent this. Multiple layers of control, multiple checkpoints, and yet all of them failed. Not at once, but step by step, quietly, until one number crossed the line, and that number destroyed everything. And this is where the story changes completely. Because up to this point, it still feels like a mistake. A number exceeded, a rule broken, a result removed. Simple, but it's not. Because what this really exposed is something much deeper. Something every team understands, but no one talks about. Modern racing is not just about speed. It's about control. Absolute control. Over every variable, every component, every decision. Because the moment you lose that control, even slightly, everything collapses. And that's exactly what happened here. Verstappen didn't lose on track. He didn't lose pace. He didn't lose position. He lost control of the system behind the race. And in today's motorsport, that's the only thing that matters. Because think about this. You can be the fastest car, the best driver, the most dominant performance of the weekend. But if one number doesn't match, none of it counts. Not partially, completely. And that creates a reality that's hard to accept. Because it means the race you watch is not the final version. It's just the first draft. The real result comes later, after every check, after every verification, after every system confirms that nothing crossed the line. And if something did, the entire story gets rewritten. Instantly. Silently. Now here's where it becomes even more uncomfortable. Because this wasn't a dramatic failure. There was no warning. No visible mistake. Everything looked perfect, which means something critical. You can do everything right and still lose. Because right is no longer defined by performance. It's defined by precision. Regulatory precision. Operational precision. The ability to stay within limits that are invisible during the race, but absolute after it. And that's the real lesson here. Not about tires. Not about 4 extra units. But about how unforgiving the system has become. Because there is no margin anymore. No tolerance. No flexibility. Just compliance. Or removal. And that leads to the final realization. The one that changes how you see everything. The checkered flag. Doesn't mean you've won. It means you've reached the final test. Because after that moment, everything is still at risk. Every detail still matters. Every number still has the power to erase everything you just saw. And in this case, that's exactly what happened. A perfect race, reduced to nothing. Not because it wasn't fast, but because it wasn't flawless. And maybe that's the most unsettling part of all, because it leaves one question that no one can ignore. In modern motorsport, how many victories are real, and how many are just waiting to disappear? And this is where everything finally comes together. Because if you go back to that exact moment, when Verstappen crossed the finish line, nothing felt uncertain. The gap was real. The performance was undeniable. The victory looked complete. But it wasn't. It was temporary. And that's the word that defines this entire story. Temporary. Because what happened next proved something brutal. Winning is no longer a moment. It's a process that continues long after the race is over. And until that process is complete, nothing is secure, not even dominance like this. Because what the system saw wasn't the performance, it wasn't the gap, it wasn't the control. It saw one thing, a number, 24 allowed, 28 used, and in that moment, everything else became irrelevant. That's the part that changes how you see this, because we're used to thinking of racing as something emotional,